So, okay, we are in Duties of the Heart. And for those of you who have this edition, either in full size like this or the cute, we are in volume two, uh, page 816, 817. And I'll make sure that okay, there's a link to it in the chat. Um, there you go. There's a link to it in the chat. And the translation in the chat is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit different, but usually it's not so, really, it's not so, the difference not so pronounced. But if you hear something, if you see something and the translation sounds better to you, please, share that with me. Um, okay. So, and I'll be checking back and forth with I check back and forth with really with the Hebrew translation. I should remind everybody that this book was actually written in Arabic. This is one of many, 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 probably most of the classics of Jewish thought and philosophy were written in Arabic. That was the language of scholarship in the Middle Ages, particularly in Spain. And so, books like this were written in Arabic, later translated into Hebrew. Um, Most of the medieval ones were translated by one family, the Ibn Tibbon family. Um, and they translated to Hebrew, and those translations have stood the test of time, but they're not always accurate. Um, Particularly in the books that have the books that have a Sufi background. Sometimes the Ibn Tibbon brothers, the Ibn Tibbons were hardcore Aristotelians, and so they tended to think of things in philosophical terms, not in kind of mystical, spiritual terms. And so sometimes they they see a concept and they may see a Sufi concept and they don't really know the technical vocabulary. And so they translate it as best as they can, but they may have gotten it wrong. So in any case, I only have the Hebrew translation with me, but that will do for now. Okay, last week, we talked about the control of the mouth, and talking about the idea of kind of inner abstinence. How is it that we create an abstinence of the self, not just an external abstinence, not just sort of keep distancing ourselves from this pleasure or that pleasure, or from uh, kind of keeping ourselves from the a kind of material pleasure or material obsession. I don't want to sound like I'm anti-pleasure because, and I don't think, I nowhere do I get the sense that Rabbi Bachya Mikuta is anti-pleasure. He's not saying that you should live a life of absolute abstemiousness, so that you're completely devoid of any pleasure in your life, but that one has to put it in its right place. So there's the externals, now the internals. So he says, okay, well, that means that we have to deal with ourselves. So he starts out by saying, okay, the first thing is to deal with speech. Why? Because speech is really the most dangerous of the faculties, right? The most dangerous of the faculties that you have. The one that's most likely to get abused. Um, and so he speaks at length about controlling the tongue and controlling what we do with our what we do with our mouth. So now he's going to talk about the eyes. So he says, next endeavor to shut your eyes and limit your sense of sight so that you do not look at what you do not need to see, or what you would distract you from reflecting on what would benefit from you. I think I mentioned last time that there were people who took this to a great extreme back in the 1700s in Lithuania. There were people who would walk around, those blinders that horses have? They would wear horse blinders, right? To make sure that when they were walking in the street, they didn't see anything. Um, if you've ever seen pictures of the Baba Sali, who was, or any of the great Moroccan tzaddikim, the great Moroccan saints, they would wear hoods over their head all the time, or they would wear a scarf over their head so that it would block their vision on either side. There's a story about, um, uh, I think it, I think it's Baba Meir. I could be wrong. There are two sons of the Baba Sali, this great Moroccan saint. One was named Baba Meir and one was named Baba Sali, Baba Baruch. Can't remember which one it was, but one of the baby Babas was in the Paris airport, and he was wearing his hood over his head. He was wearing a scarf, something to protect his vision, and and people would surround him to protect him from seeing anything, right? He's surrounded by guys, but apparently he saw a woman's ankle. He just happened to peek through, and by mistake, he saw a woman's ankle. And in order to expiate the sin of seeing the woman's ankle, he studied the entire Zohar, and did a siyum on the Zohar in order to expiate that. So some people do take a very extreme, right, position in relation to guarding their eyes. But here he says, limit your sense of sight so you do not look at what you do not need to, or what would distract you from reflecting on what would benefit you, right? So don't spend too much time looking at the things which are not which you don't need to. Um, Abstain from looking at what is superfluous as you abstain from something that would harm you, right? So he mentions this in several places, this idea of what's superfluous, the Motrot. Right? There are things that you need and things that are extra. So he says things which are extra, we have to consider sometimes as if they're even forbidden. Right? That's a tough one, right? And it's very important to know the difference between what's necessary and what's extra. So engage in seeing what the things which are required of you, but not necessarily the things which are extra. This is not easy to do at all, at all, at all. Um, the Creator cautioned us in this regard, do not stray after your heart and eyes. That's from Bamidbar, that's from the book of Numbers. And our master's blessed memory said, the heart and the eye are the two agents of sin. I mentioned this idea that we sort of we first our senses process something, and then our heart or our mind goes after it. So instead, use your sense of sight, your vision to behold the creations of the Creator may he be exalted, to examine them, reflect upon them, and apprehend through them the Creator's power, wisdom, and goodness. So instead, what's the proper use of our vision? The proper use of our vision is to look at the creation and to contemplate that creation. And I love that he uses three different verbs here. He uses three different verbs. He says, um, he says that you should uh, libchon, right, which means to examine it. So shov and to contemplate lavin and in order to, and then understand the power of and understand the power of God through it. So that means like really looking at something in a deep way, examining it, right? Examining things and learning about um, the the power, wisdom, and goodness of God. And remember that elsewhere in the book, he talks about learning science, and he says that he talks about learning science as a religious discipline, right? As something that a religious person should do. A religious person should study science and mathematics, he also says. And he even says that mathematics, that there are that there are forms of mathematics which are close to prophecy. Okay, so I don't know what to say about that, but um, that's it's an interesting thing to say. But this idea that we should be examining, use our eyes to examine the creation, see God's goodness, as David, peace be upon him, said, and he quotes from Tehillim, um, Hashemayim mesaprim kavod el, v'shar mizmor. Says the heavens tell the glory of God, and the rest of, and the psalm continues like that. That's Psalm 8. I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. Um, I'm sorry. When I see the work of your fingers, that's Psalm 8, and then the heavens tell of the glory of God, that's Psalm 19. And Psalm 19 is Psalm 19 deals with this issue at length. So then, endeavor to stop, because those are the eyes. Okay, so we're dedicating our eyes to see the creations of God and to understand God's power, goodness, and goodness and creativity through them. Then endeavor to stop your ears from hearing that what you do not need to hear. Abstain as best you can from listening to that which is superfluous. Do not strain to hear what you will not profit from hearing, such as superfluous speech, lies, tale-bearing, and slander. Right? So there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things that will not benefit us in any way to hear. Okay. Now, of course, this is a real challenge in the age of media. Okay, so when you're doom scrolling through your Instagram, like exactly how much of that stuff do you really need to know about, right? How much of that stuff is really necessary and going to contribute to to your material or spiritual well-being? Probably not a lot of it. That's good luck with that. But we're so awash in things to hear. It's This is going to be a really tough one for us. Abstain from what would lead you to rebel against God and forsake his commandments, such as various kinds of song and music, jesting and merrymaking, which divert you from religious duties and good deeds. Okay, so entertainments, right? Entertainments. And by the way, he lived at a time when there were a lot of good entertainments. I mean, we've certainly, you see, Andalusi music and poetry, and that's the era that he lived in. There's certainly plenty of entertainment. Now, that doesn't mean all entertainments are bad, right? Doesn't mean that all entertainments are, right? There are entertainments which also uplift us, right? There's music which uplift us. So we have to make decisions, right? It's very easy to say, okay, don't ever listen to any music. By the way, there, I understand that there's certainly Muslim opinions like that, not to listen to instrumental music. There are Jewish opinions like that too. That given the destruction of the temple, that some people don't listen to instrumental music. Very few people. Some people don't listen to instrumental music in within the confines of Jerusalem, which is why all the wedding halls in Jerusalem are all outside the city. Because if you do a wedding inside the city, um, you're stuck with the one-man band. It's you end up with a guy with a drum, and it's not very exciting. So a lot of people do weddings outside the city, and but aside from that, m most would say, okay, music has the ability to raise you up, has the ability to lift your spirits, to give you feelings of spirituality and so forth. So it's a question of what kind of music you're listening to and what kind of entertainments you're listening to, right? If I'll give an example, if you're depressed or you're recovering from an illness, right? It's probably a good idea, like to listen, to watch comedy, right? That can be a healthy thing to watch something which is funny and entertaining because it's something that you need. So it's like anything else in the world, you have to use your judgment. So that's why he says. Um, That's why he says various kinds of song music, jesting music, which diverts you from religious duties and good deeds. So if it's something that doesn't divert you from religious duties and good deeds, then it's less of a problem. Um, Instead, incline your ear to the words of the wise who know God and his Torah. As the wise one said, incline your ear and hear words of the wise. The ear that heeds the reproof of life abides among the wise. And I know some people will read this and they'll say, "Oh, okay, this means you should listen to rabbi tapes 24 hours a day." I guess they don't use tapes anymore. Nobody uses tapes, but rabbi videos or rabbi podcasts 24 hours a day. But wisdom is not just found in rabbi podcasts, right? Wisdom can also be found in science podcasts. It can also be found um, it can also be found in art. It could be found in talking to old people, right? Who we know, for example, that when it comes to old people, we stand up for them, whoever they may be, right? Because we assume that they have wisdom. They have the wisdom of age, right? So to spend time with older people is also an opportunity to gain wisdom. So we shouldn't
Isn't
be,
there even
you
a
know,
parsha a few weeks ago that talked about that? Like, ask your elders for they something about their wisdom.
um, I I don't remember.
I
I
have
don't.
it. I have it taped to my wall next to my home office at home about ask your elders, and then there was something, and or they have the wisdom, something.
I don't remember. I don't remember. But obviously, we know that elders have, that life is not, life is probably the best educator. As good, probably as good or better than many rabbis' podcasts. So next endeavor, to limit the t sense of taste by partaking of enough food and drink to meet your basic needs, but abstaining from anything beyond this. He's a little rough. I mean, I have to say that you know, I mean, he says cut down. The strategy for achieving this is follows. Okay, so you're ready for the Baki Bakuda diet? Here we go. So, strategy is cut down on varied condiments. Oh no, I love condiments. That's a rough one. Okay, so all those hot sauces you have in the fridge, okay, it's a problem. Okay, cut down to your condiments. Sustain yourself with one condiment if you can. Be satisfied with as little as possible, right? Some people go a little crazy with all the different sauces and condiments and things, to enhance their meals. Right? Go a little bit easy on that. If you could be satisfied with as little of it as possible, it should be eaten not for pleasure, but to facilitate the consumption of the bread. I guess that I think condiments here probably means like all the fancy, think about Middle Eastern cuisine, all the little fancy salads and dips that people have. Don't go crazy with all the different salads and dips, but just have one or two in order to get you to eat your bread, which is um, um, to eat the bread, which is the main part of the meal. Accustom yourself to doing without any condiment occasionally, so as to train your nature and make it easier for yourself when such a dish is lacking, right? So don't get so attached to something, a particular food or a particular spice. Um, I love. Thank you very much for the comment. Older folks have wisdom. Have you met me? Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm sure you have more wisdom than you think. Okay, more wisdom than you think. Okay, we get extracted from you. Don't worry. Um, So don't get too attached to a particular condiment. If you can forego the condiment which entails work and effort in its preparation and sustain yourself with food that requires no work, such as olives, cheese, figs, grapes, and the like, do so. Right? So, I guess to be a foodie would not be, to spend, lots and lots of time on food preparations. But if you can eat more simple, right? If you can eat more simple food that requires less time for preparation and less fussiness, um, that would be that would be better. It'd be interesting to compare this to the Rambam's recommendations on eating. In the Rambam actually, Rabbi Moshe Maimonides, Moshe ben Maimon, who lived in the 1100s, he um, he was a doctor and he offered a lot of advice about eating as halacha, as law, basically because you have an obligation to take care of your body, and so he offered very specific instructions on how to take care of your body, and a lot of that was about food. He emphasized that food should be your main medicine. That basically, rather than constantly trying to kind of fix yourself with medicines, better to just keep yourself healthy with good food. And he had all sorts of rules about what you eat and what you don't eat. There's a book called The Rambam Diet. You can buy that book, and it tells you all these things and adapts it to modern times. It'd be interesting to see how this compares to that. I think he also talks about not overdoing it on the condiments. If your custom is to eat 2 meals daily, let your meal by day be lighter than the one in the evening. Okay, so eat lighter in the afternoon and in the evening, so that your mobility be easy during the day and you attend more easily to your religious and secular concerns. Okay, so you don't want to weigh yourself down with a big bulky lunch so that you're lumbering around for the entire day, right? So you can't walk around and you're miserable. Um, then, if your constitution is strong, engage in fasting even one day a week. Okay, do all that you can to condition yourself not to be concerned about food and drink. Become self-disciplined. So, right, fasting. So fasting at least once a week is a good thing. Of course, now we know that there are people who do intermittent fasting and all these other things. Know that fasting can be very good for you. My rabbi fasted at least 2 days a week. He fasted on Mondays and Thursdays, and sometimes he would fast more than that, depending upon. Uh, he fasted every 10 days. Had a whole system. Anyway. Um, okay, so don't be too obsessed about food and drink. So the foodie thing just is not happening, apparently. So don't be obsessed with your food or drink. Your purpose in eating should be more for good health than for satisfaction. You should- what the expression, right? Eat to live, not live to eat. That and the purpose of your eating should be for your health and to eat nutritious foods, not just necessarily um, uh, n- not necessarily, just to be a gourmet. Your drink should be water. Water. See, I'm following my own advice already. Yeah. Um, Unless your purpose in drinking wine, those apparently are two choices. We have a choice between water and wine. I guess that was unless is to improve your physical health or to dispel anxiety from your heart. Okay, so if you're drinking wine as you're drinking wine as medieval Xanax, to relieve your anxiety, that might be okay, he says. And if you're drinking it because it somehow helps your digestion or something like that, that would be fine. As it says, give strong drink to the lost and wine to the embittered. Okay, so this is from Mishle from the Book of Proverbs that seems to imply that alcohol may have a benefit. Alcohol may have a benefit for people who are having some kind of anxiety. Um, and for my Muslim friends, I apologize. Although of course, there are two, if I remember correctly, there are two verses in the Quran in relation to alcohol. One of them says that you should weigh the benefits against the loss, right? You should weigh the benefits against the loss. It implies that there are benefits, right, to drinking wine, right? That there are benefits, but that the loss is greater than the benefits, and the other one just prohibits it completely. Um, and the second one seems to abrogate the first, but the idea that there is some kind of health benefit or psychological benefit to wine is seems to be there too. So be careful not to drink it often or to excess. And do not join drinking parties, for this is the worst sickness there is for the religion and the world, right? So don't get drunk, right? Don't get drunk and don't go to drunken parties. Says I mean, his language here is very, very strong. Um, that um, this is Hamad ve'Hagadol l'Torah le'olam. It's really really bad. So the wise one, that's King Solomon, so aptly described this when he said, "Wine is the insolent one, strong drink a riotous one." Okay, so on the one hand, if a person is drinking for medicinal purposes, um, so, okay, that might be fine, but to get drunk, absolutely not. And um, by the way, I mean, this is not just good advice, but I think it's also Jewish law. Not supposed to get drunk. Um, and and also that you're not supposed to, right? And if you're and certainly not to get drunk in drunken parties where people are bound to do things, right? Once people's inhibitions come down, right, they're bound to do things that they really shouldn't. They're bound to do things they really shouldn't do. And we know how many crimes are related to alcohol and so forth, so a person should keep far, far away from that. It's bad for your religion. In regard to food and drink, he said further, um, again from King Solomon, be not among those who drink wine to excess or among gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will become destitute. Slumber will clothe you in tatters. I love that so much, right? Um, uh, if you're if the person who is obsessed with eating big juicy steaks all the time and drinking lots of wine and being sort of drunk and full, um, that becomes something that takes over. It can take over your life, and you can really lose your bearings. Instead, um, he says, okay, then endeavor to keep your hands off worldly possessions that do not belong to you, right? Abstain from the various kinds of theft, fraud, robbery, and wrong committed against others. That's interesting that he puts this as kind of abstinence, but I guess, um, you know, while greed does not reside in your hands, right? It resides in your mind. Um, I guess in a kind of a practical way, right? In kind of practical way, said, watch your hands. Okay, watch what you put your hands on. Don't put your hands on things that belong to other people. Hesitate before moving your hands and reflect on the consequences. So before you go and you grab something, before you go, right, think about what you're doing, okay? And remember and think about the consequences. Maintain your morals and modesty by exalting yourself above doing wrong with the hands. Now, um, it's an interesting expression he uses. Um, hold on, hold on. Be'achrita or shemar maschal. Behit nasacha. Okay. So there's a well-known rabbi, Abraham Twersky, and his father he was a very interesting person. You can see videos of him and so on. He became a doctor. He became his father was a Hasidic Rebbe, and all of his grandfathers and great grandfathers were Hasidic Rebbes, and he wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to be a doctor, and um, so he studied medicine. He studied science, studied medicine, psychiatry. He wrote, I don't know, like 100 and something books. He wrote a lot of books. He used to say that he was a psychiatrist, and he wrote 100 of the same book over and over again. There's a little bit of truth to that, but his books are really good. He was a really amazing person. Somebody asked him like how he was raised. What was it like being raised by a Hasidic rabbi? And he said that his father's method of teaching him, he always said the same thing. His name is, uh, here, I'll write it, Rabbi Abraham Twersky, and look him up on YouTube. Also, he has some great YouTube videos. They're really very good. And I think he just passed away, actually. I think he just passed away. But he was really quite the person. Um, and he said his father never told him he did anything wrong. He says his father never told him he did anything wrong. His father would say nishpashnish. He says, this is not deserving of you, right? If he did something you should have done, he said, this is not deserving you. You're a good boy, right? You're a good boy. You're a special boy. You're an intelligent boy, right? Really, this is something which is just not this is just not suitable to somebody like you, right? Somebody like you should really, should deserve better than this. Um, and I think that's what he's saying here. That you sort of, if you're about to do something, right? Lift yourself up and say, like, really, I'm above this. I'm above this. This is something which is not suitable to me. I'm really above this kind of behavior, and you'll stop yourself. Okay? So, um, okay. So he says, okay. So hesitate before moving your hands, reflect on the consequence, maintain your morals and modesty by exalting yourself above doing wrong with the hands, right? I'm above this. As it says, who keeps his hand from any wrongdoings, who shakes out his palms, lest they hold any bribe. Okay, so that's your instead. Employ your hands in the performance of God's commandments. Open them with gifts to the poor and the destitute. As scripture says, open wide your hands to the poor and destitute brother, um, which is, um, it's quite a beautiful verse. Uh, This is batoch tiftach means open, right? So really, really open up your hands. And then she opens her hand to the poor. That's her Mishle. We recite that every Friday night. That's something that you recite to your spouse every Friday night. Um, and so be a giver. Okay? So be a giver, not a taker, right? The first is the urge to take, 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 and everybody has that urge to take, take, take. So don't use your hands to be a take, take, taker. Use your hand to be a give, give, giver. Um, time. Okay, I have 1 more minute. So you must employ your hands in a vocation that will supply your needs and keep you from soliciting from others or from taking money that is forbidden. A vocation that will prevent you from becoming a vehicle for others' attainment um, of virtue through their generosity and kindness towards you, so that you not cede to them your merits, your kind acts to one who is kind to you. That's a very weird way of putting that. It's a very strange way of putting it. But basically, you want to use your hands to do a job that's going to provide you with what you need so that you don't have to be dependent on other people, even if being dependent on other people would allow them the opportunity to do charity, right? So um, you should be the one who should be able to do charity. So better to be the giver of charity than to be the recipient of charity. And so you should have a job, an occupation that will allow you, right, that will allow you to have the things that you need so you don't have to get them from anyone else. You must not become a burden to other people, right? You don't want other people to have to be responsible for you, to have to take care of you. That doesn't mean never, okay? We're all going to grow old, okay? Bezrat Hashem, please God, we're all going to grow old, and that means we have to be dependent on people to some extent. That's really almost inevitable, okay? So nothing to be ashamed of there, but we try our best to use our abilities so that we don't have to be a burden on people. And as one of the wise has said, God will have compassion upon a servant who detaches himself from the world without his detachment being a burden upon his friends. When See, the thing is also, right? If you want to become one of these, you want to become somebody who's detached from the world, right? I want to become abstinent. Well, okay. So fine, I'm going to go live in my hermitage. I'm going to go curl up in my hermitage. Or I'm going to hide in a cave, but somebody's going to have to take care of me, right? So then I become a burden on society. Well, it's very good that I'm, achieving my spiritual heights, but at whose cost am I experiencing those spiritual heights? Who's having to pay for this? Right? Somebody has to pay for it. So so it says, so instead, better who engages in one of the trades and thus frees them from all trouble on his behalf. Okay, so fine. If you want to be, right, if you want to be abstinent, right, you want to be some kind of an ascetic, at least do something to support yourself so other people don't have to do that. As it says, you will eat of the fruit of the labor of your hands, you will be happy and it will be well with you. Right? This is that ultimately we should be living off the fruit of our hands. That even a person who wants to be abstinent, even a person who wants to distance themselves from materiality, should engage enough materiality not to become a burden on other people or a burden on society. So that puts us to 147, and we'll continue next time. With more about earning a livelihood and basic needs, and we'll continue there. So, thoughts? What do we think? I just blew you away. Everybody's just okay. Trust in God, but tether your camel. Exactly. Trust in God, but tether your camel. Okay. Don't, although trust in God, tether your camel. um, is from a hadith, but there's also a story, I think when the Prophet came to Medina, right? Didn't he let his camel go and wherever the camel took to rest, that was the place where he built his house. So sometimes you tether your camel and sometimes you don't. So
A comment on the food.
what?
I have a comment on the food, the
Yes.
condiments.
Yeah.
Because I at one stage I was visiting a Sufi community, and they actually believe that cooking was a kind of blessing by from God. The
Hmm.
kind of the appreciation of food is a blessing from God, and you had to read the chef's mantra before you started cooking, so that
Hmm.
you would because we have these God-given capacities to appreciate the art and the beauty of cooking. So
Yeah.
you have to
I
read a
like
mantra
that
before you
better.
start cooking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I see. This is, I confess, like when I come to these kinds of things, when I come to these kinds of things, part of me is going, okay, yeah, I understand that, and another part of me is saying, but wait a second, to set a beautiful table and beautiful meals and beautiful flavors. I mean, that's also a way of serving God. I mean, sometimes you eat a meal and like you can taste, the love and the spirituality in it. You can taste how much, what people have invested in it. And so I think I think that's yeah, another approach. I mean, I go to meals sometimes where people have, you know, f- my old synagogue, they used to have 15 salads. It was a group of Moroccan and Mexican ladies, and they made Moroccan Mexican fusion salads, and they were amazing. And they put so much like love and effort into creating these things, and and yes, I mean you look forward to it, and but it didn't feel like you were doing something physical. It felt like you were engaging in something which was deeply spiritual to be part of the love that was taking place in the kitchen and the dedication and that it was being done for Shabbat. It was done in order to have a communal meal, people together singing to God and praying so maybe there are other ways of looking at it too, for sure.
And it was really communal. Like there was, those who would serve in the kitchen and those who would serve by setting up the room or doing the washing up and all of that stuff. It was really about building community. So, yeah. But I can see how the excess as well, the excess of food, can be. I think if you're doing it flippantly, and there is still that thing of stuffing your face.
Yes.
Like, just doing things excessively, which isn't thinking about God or isn't spiritual. And that still is there, with all of these things that are things that we do habitually. You can do them with the intention of doing it on a spiritual level, or you can also do it in a way which is unthinking and unreflective and very automatic behavior, like very unintentional.
Yeah. On that, I have to tell one of my weird stories. I'm sorry, I apologize. There's a story from the Baal Shem Tov, right? The founder of the Hasidic movement, great Jewish saint, that he was sitting at his table and they were having, and he and his students were sitting there and they were having like vegetables on Friday night. Having vegetables and they're having soup or something like that. And somebody said, why are we sitting here eating soup when there's a guy across town and he makes this incredible meal at his house every Shabbat, and he really goes all out. He goes all out, and every week he goes and he kills a cow, right? Every week, right? He kills a steer or whatever it is, like a cattle, every week, and he cooks up the entire thing, and everybody eats beef, right? They have all these big piles of beef, and it's beautiful, and it's so, and everything is so fancy and nice. So the Baal Shem Tov says, "Wow, I have to see this." He says, "Come on, let's go look." And so they go and they sneak around and they sneak around and they look through the window and they see the guy sitting at the table and he has this big cow head. He's sitting at the head of the table, and his head looks like a cow, right? His head looks like a cow. And of course, the guys all scream, and they like no. Then finally, they go running back to the Baal Shem Tov and say, "What was that?" And he says, "I wanted to show you the reality of this man. The reality of this man is that nothing else mattered to him but the cow, right? All he cared about was the beef. It wasn't the Shabbat. It wasn't the singing. It wasn't that he got to take care of guests. It was the cow. So as long as it's not the cow, right? As long as it was important to you is not the cow. As long as it was not important to you is like that I have lots and lots and lots of dishes, but that the community that you build with it and the joy that comes out of that, that's right. So the intent is the key. So now you can tell that story, the cowhead story. Um, Next week I can tell you another weird Baal Shem Tov story too. So okay, I wish everybody a beautiful, beautiful day, and I'll see you Bezrat Hashem next Monday for Tehillim and Pirkei Avot, and of course this Duties of the Heart. And thank you very much for coming. And you all know where I how to find me, so please don't hesitate to share thoughts, anything that comes to you during the week. Just share with me questions and thoughts and so on. Thank you very much. Bye bye, guys.